Beowulf by Neil Foster MacPhail. Read by Mike Moore. Book 3, Old Beowulf and the Dragon. Chapter 1, The Hoard of the Dragon. Now clearly, Beowulf could have cashed in on this victory. He could have gotten as much treasure as possible and sailed it back to his uncle's great hall. He could have dove back down to the Grendelkin's lair and brought up far more of the treasure. He could even, one imagines, have fulfilled the fears of Wealhtheow and possibly Unferth, and tried to become the richest, most powerful man in Heorot, perhaps even trying to rule there after Hrothgar died. But clearly, Beowulf didn't want any of this, and just went home, returning Hrunting to Unferth with some very kind words, considering. In fact, when he returned to Geatland, Beowulf didn't even keep what little treasure he brought back with him, but gave it all to his uncle Hygelac. To be fair, his uncle did then reward him with lands and wealth, and despite not really trying, one day, Beowulf became king. The thin, young red-haired man with the wispy beard was no great warrior. He knew he could not expect to be awarded gold rings and lands and fame, so when he started to get the worst end of a battle against some invading pirates, he was delighted to find an entrance to a cave in which to hide, and hide he did. But as he went in, he found that it was an entrance to a deep underground cavern containing a sea of treasure. On the treasure hoard slept a truly enormous dragon in the manner of dragons. Worms gather the wealth, and they do not do business with others or build things or buy things or help anyone. They simply lie upon the treasure and sleep like a spider in a web of gold and jewels. They sleep, and their wealth sleeps with them. So the man who was no great warrior thought to himself, "What is the worst thing that could happen if I simply took one golden object, burgled just one thing within close reach, and ran off with it? How could a sleeping dragon possibly miss one golden object taken from a sea of golden objects?" And this is what he did. He crept in, grabbed a bejeweled golden cup, and ran off with this trophy. Well, the dragon stirred in his sleep, awoke, uncoiled himself, and smelled that someone fond of eating pork rinds had been near his hoard, and felt that it had been fooled with, and discerned also that a jeweled golden cup had been stolen. After the manner of dragons, he burned with rage. His inner fire heated up white-hot and began to pour out when he breathed, and pushing his way out through the larger, long-disused dragon exit, he burst from his treasure cavern into a world where an old man named Beowulf was now king. The dragon had no idea who had taken his cup, nor where he had gone, nor even who was king. So what he did was quite simple. Flying just above the treetops, he followed his nose to locate anywhere human beings lived, and when he found any horse or barn, shed or mansion, he burned it. Unlike most dragons, he was not a creature who spoke or argued. If he had a name, no one ever learned it. He simply took deep, angry breaths, swelling his ribs out, glowing blindingly white-hot from the fire within, and then he spat out gouts of flame many times longer than his own immense, fully 50-foot length. The dragon was so large, he would not have comfortably fit in any mead hall in the land. In just a few hours, it seemed as if every single building of any kind for miles and miles was alight. It would only be a matter of time before it was Beowulf's great hall's turn to be lit on fire too. Soon enough, local politicians, spurred on by their people, showed up at Beowulf's royal hall, demanding he tell them what he was going to do. Some strongly suggested Beowulf should offer the dragon the man who stole the treasure, with the treasure he had stolen, so the dragon could eat the man and take his treasure back. Maybe then, they felt, the dragon would be satisfied. Beowulf wasn't sure. "There's no guarantee that would work, nor that we can find the one who stole from the dragon," he growled, deep in thought. Others argued passionately that the traditional and proper thing to do was to offer a beautiful young virginal woman to the dragon to do with as he wished. They insisted that dragons famously love beautiful young virginal women, and so it was worth a try. Some even seemed willing to provide names of specific young women they thought the dragon might like. "We're not going to do that either," Beowulf the king told them all, to their strict disapproval. And no one was very pleased when Beowulf told him what he had actually decided to do. His hair and beard had been white for some time now, and though he still stood straight and strong, the truth was that he had grown a bit fat and quite slow. He mostly took long naps, especially during the cold weather. Beowulf announced firmly, "This kingdom does not negotiate with dragons, and the only thing I know to do with monsters is kill them." Then, over the objections of his court, he walked off stiffly and slowly to find a blacksmith who could make him a dragon-fighting shield. One counselor to the king warned that in so doing, Beowulf might well be remembered as a brave warrior and mighty hero, but as a very bad king. "A king's proper place is on his throne," the man proclaimed, standing resolutely in Beowulf's great hall. But Beowulf had already left. Every war shield anyone had ever seen was always a circular, thick, sturdy piece of wood, just large enough that one could almost have hidden behind it, curled up into a ball. Some of the more brutal bucklers had iron nails hammered into them to turn aside blades, an iron spike sticking out of the middle to stab people with, or a border of iron around the edge to smash people's swords and axes aside while stabbing them over it with the other hand. But every single one was always made of wood. With many of the wooden structures in his kingdom in flames, Beowulf did not want to hold up a wooden shield to protect him from dragon fire. So he had a smith quickly make him a very large, impossibly heavy shield of solid iron. There was no time to make it into a perfect circle or decorate it with the king's crest, so it was just a large, thick, rectangular plate with a handle on the back. "Do you want leather straps on the back to put your arm through?" the smith asked. But Beowulf wanted the whole thing to be made of iron, and so the smith attached an iron handle to the back as Beowulf went off to collect his war gear, which had been hanging up as wall ornaments of significant historical and cultural value for some years. The smith himself, though a strong young man, found he had serious difficulty lifting the iron shield once it was done, and he doubted his old king would be able to stand upright with it. Beowulf had survived many battles and adventures since Heorot, but he was now as old as anyone's grandfather, though he himself had no children. Beowulf came back to collect his shield, wearing the fancy gold-decorated helmet Hrothgar had given him many decades before, and his repaired mail shirt bearing his mighty sword nailing. He grabbed the thick iron shield and picked it up just as if it were merely made of solid oak, grunting as he did so. And then, on horseback with 11 men, he headed off to where the worst of the burning was said to be going on. They had not got far before a young man stopped them and admitted that it had been he who had started all of the trouble by stealing a cup from the dragon's hoard. He pressed the gold goblet into his king's hand and then tried to leave. As he did, Beowulf's iron grip closed on his shoulder. "Wait, we're going to need you to lead us to the dragon's hoard now," the monster hunter king snarled, not unkindly. "We cannot fly to keep up with him, so the thing I always do is put myself where he is headed, as I did at Heorot, or where he lives, as I did with Grendel's mother. I do not know where he is headed, unless it is to find you, so why not put you where he lives? If one man stealing one cup has enraged the malicious monster so much that he is setting fire to half of my kingdom, how quickly will he fly if all 13 of us threaten his hoard entire?" The young man had no comment to offer as to this. And so they rode with the young man, who was not a brave warrior, directly to where the hoard was. It took them 2 hours to get there on horseback. The place had a small cave entrance surrounded by looming cliffs and scrub brush. Then they waited. Chapter 2. Final Showdown. When we are old, we can, and often do, travel in our thoughts to the time of our youth, to the time when our legs were strong and our backs did not hurt, and our eyes and wits were as sharp and as quick as cat's teeth. While they waited for the dragon, no doubt Beowulf thought about when he had been an orphan boy of 7, a wild, clumsy little creature. Back then, the king of the Geats had been an aging hero figure named Hrethel. Gray-haired Hrethel had adopted little Beowulf, who was his grandnephew, and treated him exactly as he treated his own sons, Heribald, Hæthcyn, and Hygelac, even though Beowulf's name did not start with an H. Needless to say, Hrethel the hero king made a strong impression upon little Beowulf. When the boys had grown into teens, though, Hrethel faced an impossible situation. His own boys, always more eager to learn how to use weapons than their younger kinsman Beowulf was, spent the afternoon shooting horn bows that were perhaps too powerful for them to use properly. They had been warned that the bows were too dangerous for them to use unsupervised. Being boys, they used the bows nonetheless. And improperly supervised and not wearing safety equipment, Hæthcyn accidentally shot his brother Haribald through the eye, and his brother Haribald died. You have no doubt heard about this one before, purely as an ethical problem, Hrethel's dilemma. Accident or no, King Hrethel is now duty-bound to avenge the death of his son Haribald by killing Hæthcyn, his son's killer, but who is also his son. How can he avenge the loss of his son by killing another of his sons, and in so doing, lose twice as many sons? Yet Hrethel is doubly duty-bound as king to punish the death of one of his subjects. A life has been taken, and must needs be repaid in blood. If only it had been a stranger, preferably from another country, who had killed a son, the one house could have fought a bloody battle with the other to get satisfaction, and the blood of the son could have been washed away in the ensuing flood of battle gore. But, due to one accident, both sons die, one with an arrow through the eye at the hand of his brother, and now the other, upon the gallows, must surely die at the hand of his father the king. But this does not seem to be what happened. Hrethel, stuck in this situation, did not kill his son Hæthcyn, despite the famous dilemma. Nevertheless, not many years later, when the Geats engaged a faction of the Swedes in battle, Hæthcyn fell at Ravenswood. And so, when sorrowing grey-haired Hrethel was no more, the only member of his house left in line to be king was Hygelac, the remaining son. And so Hygelac became king, and did his best to be a father figure to young Beowulf. Makes you think, doesn't it? By the time the dragon could be seen, a rapidly growing speck in the sky, Beowulf was psyching himself up for battle. I killed the Nikras in my swimming contest with Breca. I killed Grendel and his mother both, and numerous sea creatures beside. I killed Dagfrin, knight of the Frankishmen, before anyone else could. I braved in my younger days battles too many to count and creatures beyond description, and I will kill this creature. He will face me and me only. You men go and witness the fight from those trees over there, where you will be safe. When I am done, you shall have a share in the treasure, though you shall have to help carry it. And with this, Beowulf the king said goodbye to each of his men, and sent them to hide from the imminent serpent in the tree line. And they all hid in the trees, while the dragon flew in like a flung stone, and vanished from their sight behind a stretch of cliffs. Somehow, they knew the beast was checking on his treasure trove. Then white-haired Beowulf ranged around, walking stiffly and carrying his heavy iron shield in his uncanny grip, until he found the larger entrance the dragon had used. And when he found it, he called out to the dragon in a loud voice to come out of the cave and face him. This call reverberated off the cliff faces like the peal of a trumpet, and then Beowulf rested the large rectangular shield on the ground and braced it from behind, holding long, thick nailing ready in his free hand. Coiling and uncoiling in fury, belly heating up with molten wrath, the beast erupted from his cavern, and every man who had come with Beowulf held tight with terror to his tree, scarcely daring to peer around it at the ensuing dragon fight. The dragon blasted out gouts of flame until the shield Beowulf sheltered behind began to grow red with heat. Not wanting to be cooked alive, the mighty hero lifted his shield before him, planted his feet, and unleashed a world-ending downward blow at the flame-spewing head when the dragon grew incautious enough to put his head within the range of Beowulf's sword arm. Never had a sword been swung with half so much power or speed, despite the age of the swordsman. Nailing was a strong, well-made weapon of renown that had never let Beowulf down. The blade struck the beast squarely across the forehead, and the sword rebounded from the dragon's skull, completely failing to bite into it. Beowulf rested his shield on the ground and took refuge behind it as the dragon vomited ever more flame at it, and the dragon fire lit the edges of Beowulf's beard on fire and began to cook his arm like a cod on a campfire.